The Macabre World podcast is brought to you by Darker Art Studio, home of real human bone jewelry. Stock and custom pieces are available, so visit us on the web at www.darkerartstudio.com and show them your darker art side. Macabre World, a podcast from Darker Art Studio, where we explore the dark, strange, and unusual from this world and beyond. Hello and welcome to the Macabre World podcast. I'm your host, Rocky Digati, and with me is AC from Midnight Media. AC, thanks for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. Really excited to be here. I appreciate it.
Now, people might wonder, who is he and why is he here? Well, first of all, very prolific content creator. Tell folks a little bit about what you do.
Sure. I recently started a YouTube channel a couple months ago. Let's go back a little bit further. I've been doing podcasts for a little while now, about 2.5 years. I was on one called Shotgun Candy with a couple of friends of mine. One is in Australia, and we would get together. We would kind of decide on a topic beforehand at the beginning of the week, and on Sunday mornings, we would get together and kind of talk about what we learned and what we surmised, but never speaking to each other during the week. So it was always a surprise. We also take live messages at the same time. So it was a dynamic show where people would be able to give their real-time thoughts, and that really changed the game. I don't think a lot of people are doing that, where they're actually taking calls on a live stream. And that took a little hiatus. So I said to myself, I want to do something. I want to explore kind of what you do, macabre, darker side of media. The darker side of media. Some things have included, like, public access TV. There's some wild stuff on public access between the 70s and 90s. Take a look at that. Things that don't make sense, like fake martial arts, for example. What makes someone believe that a chi ball is coming at them, or they're going to be able to deter some kind of a punch because they will it to not. That's a very interesting thing to me, how people can make that disconnection from reality.
You know what you call a guy who wills a punch in the nose to not happen? A guy with a broken nose.
A guy who's going to the hospital.
That worked. Yeah. You know how many people? It's funny. We all talk about and I kind of lump all of this together, and we're going to be talking about some unusual religious practices and some of the more unusual religious factions. But one of the things that I've always said, people talk about the power of prayer, and that is, I think, a very real thing, if nothing else, for the fact that it changes the mindset, and the change of mindset will change your actions, and your actions change your life. So if you just go on the purely psychological of the idea of people bonding together for support and a common cause, and that can, I think, affect how they react to other things in their life. And I don't think it's any different than the intention and type of ritual. Intention and ritual can be the power of prayer, can be a spell, can be any kind of intention and ritual that you're enacting to bring out change. And I think it's very interesting that people sort of separate that, and this one is good and this one is bad, and I think it starts to get to be where they're drawing lines in the sand, when I think it's more of a common thread.
I think it's a lot of the aesthetics as well. If we're talking about, for example, Santeria, which is something that, like something like that, it's aesthetics, where someone can fall to their knees in Catholicism or Christianity and pray to God in a certain way. But there are other rules that are brought into effect here, where you might need to, for example, give a saint something to eat, which is something that's super foreign to people who are traditionally religious, right?
Depending.
Depending. There's a broad spectrum, of course, but for the most part, the aesthetics of actually sacrificing an animal to your higher God. Some people might have questions on why that would need to happen, and it's hard to explain to people, especially it's one of those things where you have to be there, because it's not always pretty either. There are some things that, for example, things like that live in pots with rocks inside of them. Maybe they have chicken blood from the last time that you gave it something to feed, with feathers stuck to it. It's not a pretty thing, but a lot of people
it's a little stinky too. I'm not being funny. A lot of those different fetishes smell.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Some of them
And
are intentionally smelly.
yeah, uh, hey, there's a machete coming in. There's a machete coming out of it. There's handcuffs. There's different things that you need to give it so it can understand you a little bit better, so it can protect you, right? Um, like you can have the guerreros, which is the guerreros, like the actual like humongous steel pot, almost like a black kettle pot that has a lot of the things that you need to uh, kind of make it your own. And then you see that, and it's a huge altar. It almost looks satanic to the layman, right?
Well, a guerrero in a cauldron, kind of,
Kind of a great.
yeah, same ish. Of course, where I'm from, it's a panala, but anyway, you know.
Okay.
Well, we just got, we had a brief conversation prior to starting the recording, and as the listeners know, my mom's family's Portuguese, and which is not in the United States at all in any way considered Latin or Latino, because obviously we're not Spanish speakers, and also we're not from anywhere south of Texas or any of the Central American area, and we're not from Spain.
Right.
So it sort of defies all of those rather restrictive and sometimes odd labels that go to. So I just say pork, but that's like pork. Portuguese is like pork, we're the other white meat. But but the cultural crossovers are very similar in a lot of cases. And syncretic religion is one of the things. Now, your family. Tell me a little bit about your family background.
Sure. So I am a second generation Cuban. My father came over from Cuba. My mother just missed the revolution. She came over and she was born in 58.
Okay.
And my grandmother and my grandfather, they were well to do in Cuba. But they would go to, before it was not allowed, they would go to New York, and they had a residence in New York. They had family in New York, and they would go back and forth from Cuba. So it was less restrictive. But when, the fall of Batista and all of those things happened, obviously the music went away, then, right? Our culture
Right.
almost died. So when that happened, she was forced with a harsh decision of, bringing her pregnant self over, and then having my mom in 58. My dad came over, a little bit later. So he spent most of his childhood in Cuba. He came over around the age of 17. And so there's a difference there, because culturally my mom speaks, perfect English. You would never think that she
Right.
would be Cuban. My dad does speak with a Cuban accent. No matter how long you're here, I think you have that if you were born in Cuba. And I was lucky enough to be born here outside of all of that. But at the same time, my grandmother instilled in me a remembrance, like to make sure that I didn't lose our culture. And it was very important for her to have that in me, right? She only spoke Spanish at home because she knew that eventually I'd go to American school and I'd learn English. So really, Spanish was my first language, and I thank her every day, and I miss her very much. But I thank her every day for giving me that gift, because most people come over, they'll never speak Spanish again. They'll just assimilate to American culture,
Right.
and forget. And then by the time I have children, that generation, it's over, So
And there's those of us in the middle that answered in English. I'm just saying. It's not the best way to retain a language.
Right, I know. But
Yeah.
but that was that was really heroic on her part to be able to escape that kind of oppression from Cuba. And of course, that makes us think about communism in a different way when you're here, and how those people are still there. It was super heroic for her to come over, and the fact that there's people who actually sent their children from Cuba to America on the Peter Pan flights that were just completely just, I don't know where you're going to go. You're just going to go, and someone's going to pick you up, and I may never see you again, but it's that important for you to leave this place.
Right. I don't think it's taught stringently enough. And it's so much more recent history. Like, people know everything about history that's so much older, and it's such impactful history on the history of the United States as well. And I don't think people realize, as I think it's underspoken about. I don't think a lot of people are talking about the refugee situation. I don't think that people are talking about the regime and the government situation, and realizing how many people sacrificed so much.
They did. They did.
It's an incredible story in every family, and it needs to be told.
It does, and I don't think people in the United States understand, especially with in the Bay of Pigs and how we were so close to kind of invading, right? And we were already on the
Oh
beach.
yeah.
In terms of America, we were already on the beach, and it was really JFK who was like, we're not doing that. We're not giving air support, and we're not going to stick our nose in a tiny country. We're going to look like a bully, right? And it's so complex, and the Russian part of it is so complex as well, just because they have the Russian backing. A lot of people in Cuba are named Russian names. A lot of people are named like Usnavi. Well, you know what Usnavi is? U.S. Navy.
Oh no.
U.S.
Wow.
Usmail, U.S. male. They
Oh
see something
wow.
from
Who's my
America, and they name their child that. It's really
and
incredible.
my grandparents from other countries, they love America. They loved America. Like my grandmother, my dad's mother collected like all kinds of tchotchkes that were like, all kinds of Liberty Bells and statues of liberties, because that was the first thing she saw when she came here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So it was crazy the way they embraced the culture.
exactly. And as far as how it ties into the religion aspect of it, and what they believed, a lot of my family back in Cuba, obviously, they took upon this religion. My father was hecho santo, which means made
Mhm.
made into the saint that chooses you. I guess we'll get into that a little bit in a minute, how that works. But he was done that in Cuba, which is obviously a much cheaper thing to do in Cuba when you don't have much, but in America, that costs $17,000 to $20,000 to be
Does
done.
it really?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I guess it's like it. Well, I mean, it's like seminary school. I'm not. I'm not too familiar with this part of the equation. Do tell.
Yeah. So, I mean, my father became an italero, which is an italero is like a high speaker. Imagine there's a babalao, which is the highest, like
Hmm.
the highest priest, the one that lets you know. For example, let's say I want to, I'm taking you to see what saint you are, what saint governs your body, and I'll take you to a babalao, and he'll throw the seashells or tirarte los caracoles, and then he'll find out what saint, through that he'll find out what saint you are. For example, I'm Ogun, which is like the war the warish kind of a saint, and he goes with the colors of green, so you'll be assigned a color as well. If you were Obatala, that means you are white. Obatala is white, and they have another set of rules, almost like the zodiac, if you were to think of it in those terms. But
Right.
you're more assigned kind of at birth, and you were always that. And one of the funny parts is like your whole family going, "Oh no, you're Chango. I know that because look at your personality, and you love red, and you love
We
black."
can't all be Django.
Right.
It's like
Everybody wants it.
you just can't all be Django.
Right.
Yeah, it's just like when everybody used to dress up as Kiss. No, everybody can't be Gene. Okay, you gotta.
It is. It is. It is crazy because there are so many of them, and then you don't know which one you're going to be. It's almost like a surprise, and you're kind of built up to this until you go to the babalao, and then you find out, and it could be a sense of elation where you're like, I knew it, and I'm so happy I'm that, or oh, I'm Yemaya,
Right.
I'm the sea god,
Well, no, wait. I think Jason Momoa has made us change about how we think about sea gods. Just saying. You know.
He's brought a whole new
Yeah.
set of chicks into the
Let's just say he's
equation.
brought it. Okay. I'm just gonna
Hey,
leave it. He's brought it.
he's brought it.
He
I always
has
told my
brought
wife,
it.
if you can score that, you got it. You can go for it.
That's her hall pass.
That's her hall pass. That's her hall pass. I said, if you
That's
can
her
trick
hall
him into
pass.
having sex with you, you got it.
You know what? I think she'd earn it at that point.
At that point, you
You know,
got it. I can't say no.
what can you do now? Who's your hall pass? I have to know.
Same question. I was like, you know what? I'll let you know when I see her. I'm gonna keep it open.
That's the world's smartest
That's
husband there,
yeah,
ladies and
yeah.
gentlemen. He knows not to answer that question ever.
Give her the hall pass first, and then she has no,
No,
she can't tell
right?
me no.
She can't tell you no. You'll know when you see. But yeah, it is Santeria is a Yoruba religion, and it was brought in through the trade routes into Cuba, is my understanding. And there are similar folk magic and types of religions in Brazil. Candomblé comes immediately to
Candomblé.
mind.
Exactly.
Yeah, and there are folk religions all through Europe that are syncretic. And when I keep using the word syncretic for folks who may be listening who hadn't heard the word before, it basically means it's being aligned with Catholicism, which typically was done out of fear and hiding
Mhm.
initially. A lot of even Celtic paganism went into kind of a syncretic place because when whole groups of people come in and say, no more pagan stuff, you have to do this. And everybody says, but this is what we believe. They find a way to make it work.
They absolutely do. Try to
And
take Catholicism away from a Catholic. Try to take Christianity away. People will find a way. It's so deep embedded in their hearts, and the belief system is so strong that I dare you to defy someone's religion to their face.
well, I remember, I think it was, I always forget his name, the gentleman who wrote The Serpent and the Rainbow. And of course, that was a terrific film back in the
What a
80s.
movie! What a movie!
Oh, yeah. And he's an ethnobotanist out of Harvard University. But he I'm going to say Wes, but it was Wes Craven who directed it. But what was interesting was the quote that I remembered was Haiti is 100% Catholic, excuse me, a 90% Catholic and 100% voodoo.
Incredible.
And I thought that was a great way to describe the entrenched nature of the syncretism in religion.
You're right
So
about that.
your dad, received his honors there. Then he brought that when he came.
Yeah. And then, of course, my grandmother was also on my father's side was something of a, I'm going to use colloquial terms, something of a fortune teller, right? Where
Sure.
she would do tarot cards, and she was probably one of the best tarot cards uh, readers that I've ever seen. Believe you can believe or not, right? Either you
I
believe what's
read cards.
happening. You read cards? That's amazing.
My grandmother taught me.
Oh, I would love to get a reading. I haven't had one.
We can make that work.
I would love that. You know what? You come on a Midnight Media, will you do a reading on me?
I would love to do that.
It's awesome. So
Deal.
deal. So she was amazing. I've seen things that I'm not a believer now, right? I'm an atheist now, just because of everything that I've put together. Seeing what I saw as a child, growing up so fast, because another facet of that is that you grow up very fast. You see things that maybe as a child you should not see.
It's
Um,
intense.
it's intense. I've seen people take on spirits, get possessed, become other people, use other um, languages that they couldn't possibly have known. So some things really touch you as a child, and you're like, "Oh my God, this is all real." There's something called un toque de santo, which is basically it's a big party where a lot of people come together, especially people who play la tumbadoras or the congas, right?
Mm-hmm.
There could be 5 to 10 of those folks doing that, and they start playing a rhythmic African rhythms, and it's kind of trance-like, right? Where a lot of the women dressed in white, or maybe the people who just became santeros, right, through who are yabo, which are the brand new initiates that have to eat with a spoon and not have sex for a year and dress in white, and those folks might be dancing or taking on a spirit, right?
Right.
I've also seen
Getting
my
ridden.
absolutely. And I've also seen my grandmother on a white plate. And this is going to be hard to explain. On a white plate facing down, she would light a match, and whoever would come up and ask her a question or something, someone she was reading, she would be able to, with the match soot, make a drawing without her seeing it. It was under the plate, and then she would show the plate, and clearly they would be a woman and another woman, and then she would explain what was on the plate, and she was like, "Oh, who's this woman?" She was, and the person would be like, "Oh, that's my wife, and that's my sister,"
Wow.
and right.
Now
So
I've heard of tassomancy, tea leaf
mm,
reading. My grandmother was adept at that. Ossomancy, people who read bones, cards, cartomancy.
right,
That's new.
yeah,
That's not something I'm familiar with. I think it's fascinating.
it was a lot to take in as a child, but then as you grow, you see that it could be, there could be a piece of charlatanism in it, and you can't help but do that because you're growing up in the United States. You see a lot of, everyone in the US is trying to sell you something, or
We
get
do breed cynics at an alarming rate.
absolutely. So that was part of it. So as I grew and I understood other religions and maybe other ones, like, that could be just like it, or what snake oil salesmen were, and all of these things you kind of put two and two together. But at the same time, I've seen things that I can't explain. So I'm waiting. I have an open mind. I'm waiting for that day that I'm open to believing anything. I just want a little
Right.
bit more proof, and then I need to see a little bit more. But Serpent in the Rainbow is probably the best depiction for
Wade
anybody that wants to
Davis.
know.
It came to me.
Wade
Wade
Davis,
Davis.
good
Yes,
one,
Wade Davis.
good
And
one.
he is an ethnobotanist. Oh yeah. I'm senile, but it's got a little bit of a delay. Um
You're getting there.
yeah, we all have our moments. But Wade Davis, yeah, and that actually I thought there was a very much of a truth on the culture of places that have syncretic religion. And it's funny because it becomes as normal in everyday life as anything else that you would do, having your coffee, reading your cards. I mean, it just becomes a thing. One of the biggest things growing up for me, my grandmother from Portugal was a curandera, and that would be for folks who aren't familiar with the term, it's an herbalist, and she would make up cures. But my aunt and would tell me that she would kind of like go into a trance,
Mhm.
and she would act almost like an Edgar Casey kind of thing, where she would sort of read into somebody's physicality and say, oh, I see the problem. You have an ulcer. And then she would come out of her trance and make a preparation and say, okay, you need to take this before you eat, and you need to not eat this, that, or the other thing, and your ulcer is going to get better. So she was like this human MRI kind of thing. She did not do anything like that I witnessed, but that is something that she would. But I do remember working in the garden with her, and every plant had a purpose.
They used to they used to burn the witches in 1692 for things like that.
They did, and actually, there were no witches burned in the United States in 1692. They were all hanged.
Yes, they were all hung, and I actually made that mistake.
I don't know if they were hung or not. That Giles Corey, I don't know, but
I made that mistake on TikTok. I have a separate channel where I do a little bit of conspiracy, like shorts, like YouTube shorts,
sure.
and I have a TikTok and a YouTube doing that. Short form content, which is the way to go, I guess, these days, aside from my long form. But someone corrected me when I said, that's where the term "burn the witch" comes from. Actually, people were like, actually, my 10th grandmother removed was hung and in 1692, and that never happened. There was no burning of any witches. They were all hung.
Right. Not in this, not in the United States.
Right.
I mean, in Europe, things got a little smoky. And in fact, I had an episode with a gentleman named José Letão from Portugal, who is an expert on the Portuguese involvement in the Inquisition. And no clean hands there. Just no clean hands there. Well, actually, one of the other things that you could get you put on the map for that is red hair.
Yeah. Oh, you were definitely a witch.
Yeah. I hear that a lot.
I see you.
Yeah, I hear that a lot.
Yeah.
But and it's crazy because some of the things that you think is normal. When I got to like school age and I saw other kids had cherry cough drops, do you know how offended I was? I went home and I'm like, you give me this dirt tea, and all my friends get like cherry cough medicine and stuff. And and you don't realize you're different until you realize you're different. And in a discussion that we had, we talked about sort of like sort of the perception of economics domestically versus abroad. And I always say it, and this is a blanket statement, don't write me letters, people, that if you don't really get out of the United States, not that there's anything wrong with staying around the United States, but if you don't really get out of the United States, it can be difficult to really fathom what truly poor is and what truly rich is, because what our parameters for rich and poor are limited to the United States. And when you go out into the world, you're going to see extremes way off the map of what
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I mean, there's poor and then there's poor.
Yeah.
I remember, and then there's rich, and then there's Dubai rich.
There's unfathomably rich.
There's gold toilet seat rich.
Yeah.
There's probably gold toilet paper rich. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that seems like it would chafe. It really does.
That would hurt. That would hurt.
Yeah,
it just in principle. I'm so rich, I have to do it.
All right. Yeah. I'm so rich, I have got to do it. I don't care if it chafes. If I got someone to take care of that.
Worth it.
Worth it.
Worth it.
So so here you grow up with all of this unusual stuff going on around you and everything. Now, did you have friends that were cousins? Usually, your first friends end up being your cousins in most cases. But did the rest of the family think it was strange? It was just sort of like it was business as usual.
Well, I'll tell you, yeah, and you're right. In Miami, it's not as uncommon, right? So that's kind of like the Cuban diaspora came from Cuba to Miami and kind of set up shop there, made Miami, for better or for worse, what it is now, right? And there are pockets of, just like there was in Cuba when the folks came over and settled over in Cuba. They made their pockets of what is important to them, what religion they want to follow, and of course, there's tiny, like you mentioned, there's other religions like Santeria that have small tweaks, just like Christianity or Catholicism do. But when you are basically in that world in Miami, you go out to Homestead, which is where our livestock and things are in South Florida. That's where you go buy the animals that you need to sacrifice. There's a person for that. There's a farmer that supplies you for this, and he knows what they're for. He's not,
Right.
raising chickens thinking you're going to eat them. He knows exactly what they're for. So there are places that things are just accepted, and you don't think of it as something that's different until, like you said, go somewhere else, see how other people live, right? If you go to New York City, that's not a very prevalent thing, but any pocket where there's Cubans or Haitians, people from the West Indies, from the Caribbean, you will probably find things like this. It's just, and they'll find a way to do it. Just like you're going to find a way to fashion yourself a rosary or a wooden cross, you're also
Sure.
going to fashion yourself seashells and whatever you need to continue your religion.
Yeah, your cowrie shells and another form of divination is shell divination. That's
Right.
very, very popular. I have a little set for that. But and it's like the first time you see somebody serve rice with meatloaf and you go, "What?
What are you doing?
What are you doing? First of all, why is the rice white?"
Wait a minute. What
Wait
are
a
you doing?
second.
What
Because
am I putting
my
on
mom
this?
always put a pinch of saffron in the rice, and I was just sort of looking like, okay, so why is the rice white? And you start to learn different things. And so do you have a crazy family? I have a crazy family, and everybody's heard a million stories about my crazy family. What's your crazy family like?
My crazy family is, full of intrigue because, you're never supposed to know everything about your family as a child. There's a lot of, for some reason, Cubans, I'm not sure if it's the same with Portuguese folks, but you never tell the kids the whole story, right?
Never.
Even when they're older, they don't get the whole story. You have to pick the minds of different older folks maybe before they pass on, just so you can find a little bit and piece together your lineage, because it's better to not tell the kids than I don't know, look bad or be, have any stain upon the family. And I'm sure it's like that with every color under the sun
To some degree,
to
yeah.
some degree.
Well, they used it. What was great was that's how I learned to understand Portuguese, not because I had such a great interest in my culture. It was code. The adults were talking. I needed to decipher it. I,
It was more
I,
curiosity, right? Yeah. It
I
was more
must
like, what are
learn
you,
to understand what they're speaking of.
they're talking about me. I know
They're talking about me. I know they're talking.
it. But
That's one of those things that kills me. And no matter what the language is everyone who hears a language they don't understand assumes somebody's talking about them. When as somebody who understands more than a language other than English, when I'm around people that are speaking a language that I understand, you know what they're talking about? The same boring shit that everyone else is talking about. It's
right.
not interesting. It's not about me,
It's
you, or
not about
anybody
you.
else.
I heard an awesome thing. It said, I forget where I heard it, but no one looks at you the way you look at you. Right.
True.
So the way
That's a
you
great
look
way
at
to put
you,
it.
the way you look at you, no one else is there because, oh my God, am I doing this? What did I say? How do I look? No one is thinking about that because everyone's so traumatized. They're thinking about their own thing and how they look.
Right. Right. Yeah.
So
They're
don't
too
worry.
focused on the panic. So one of the more I always say the more lively events, and I don't necessarily mean happy, but lively events are funerals and weddings.
Yeah.
And those, especially when you're going to mix in all that spice with it, it gets funny. Now, my mom, and I'm safe because even though I taught her Alexa how to listen to the podcast, she doesn't listen. She doesn't. So I'm safe. My mom is the color announcer at the funeral. So if you sit next to my mom, she's gonna tell you that's so and so's cousin. she knows this one's cousin, and and everything, and then and then afterwards she'll just make that noise. Somebody in your family makes this noise, and they do it right before they disapprove of something. My mom will be
Nice.
like, "I will tell you, in my day, you never saw a man go to a wake in jeans. That wasn't done. Those were work pants. You came to a wake, you wore slacks."
Disrespectful.
Right, and everything. And if you and I think she had a couple of mild myocardial infarctions over a few hemorrhoids over the years, and then somebody wore a red dress.
Oh my
Game
God.
over.
Harlot.
Game over.
Jezebel.
Yeah, she was just like, oh, they didn't like him. Yeah, who goes to a wake in a red dress? You know what that means? You know, and so it was always this great, running commentary. Who's your color announcer in the family?
Probably it was my grandmother before she passed. But luckily, this is the way how life works. People are getting older, and you see your mom, your aunt turn into, the next generation. And this same. My mom has become that. She's
Oh yeah.
she's very into the last time you spoke to those people for some reason. It's like that's just like the same way you said that your mom is a color commentator. Is like that's Marta y su hija, quien sea. La última vez que hablamos, the last time we spoke, 15 years ago. And she's very worried about us saying hello again and reconnecting. So I think
Oh,
people in their
okay.
in their old age really want everyone to connect, because they probably see themselves at the end
Right.
of
They
their
want to leave something that they wove together and make sure their family's intact. Sure.
super well put. Yeah. Even if it's not your family, it's like those people were nice to you at one point. Make sure that
They want to weave it together. They want
yeah.
everything
And it's
to not be
incredible.
asunder.
My father is also coming to the twilight years, and same thing. I have a brother. We have two brothers outside of my mother's marriage. One that completely denounced Santeria and went born again Christian, and one that was just kind of too young to take it all in. By the time that he was born, he came of age. It was a bit less prevalent. A lot of this ended. A lot of the like Santeria for work, right? There's
Right.
Santeria that you believe in, and then you have your own santos and stuff. And there's people seeking you out saying, this
I
person,
need you to do something for me.
yes. And there's there's a bit of extortion to it too. Like it's a hard word, but like it's a bit of like, oh, your son has cancer, for example. Okay, well, we need to do these rituals, and these rituals, we're going to need a dove, a goat, 3 chickens, and we're going to need chalk and a special perfume and feathers from this dove, and we're going to need to do this ritual, and it's going to cost you $6,000. You know,
Well, I
um,
think it's also in some ways it's born of a culture that, like, I'm thinking of, like, what one sees in Haiti is that there's not a lot. So if you have something you can sell, you sell it.
sure. Well, you're
You
also
know,
playing on people's emotions, because who's going to sell? Well, do you not love your son? Do you not want to try to get this remedied for your son? So there's a little bit of that, which is ugly.
it is
When you're
ugly.
trying to make money from it,
Yeah.
when you are doing it from the kindness of your heart, because we're all believers, that's the most purest form of it.
Yes. And it's interesting because that's when I start to think about charlatanism, because I start to say, well, if you're going to extort someone's, and we've had guests on talking about mediumship and things like that, and I'm always very, very careful. There are some wonderful, wonderful people out there that I've spoken with, and I do feel they're sincere and have a gift. However, I know that it would be very easy for people to obtain key information from various sources, and enough to be able to prey on someone in their grief, and to anyone who's experienced grief, you're very vulnerable. And I think there needs to be a governance on that. And actually, one of the guests that I had on in my first season has a verification process where they test the mediums, which I thought was pretty interesting. But I mean, it goes to it speaks to that, where desperate times.
Exactly. And when you are desperate, I mean, what does it cost you? What is the life of your son? For using that example, what is the life of your, anyone that you're trying to do this ritual for? There's some people that it's not even that deep. Some people just want someone to love them, right?
Sure.
And I want someone to fall in love with me. Can you make this happen? Now we're talking about brujeria, right? Now we're talking
Right.
about black magic. We're talking about blood magic.
Bending wills.
Exactly. I'm going to need a lock of their hair. I'm going to need a bit of their fingernails. This is disgusting, right? I'm going to need, something of theirs, something with their
Basically,
name
you
on
got to
it.
make friends with the lady who sweeps up at the hairdo shop.
That's right. That's right.
She's
Where
got
do they
it
do
all.
their hair? She's got a
Where
sack
they
of
do
it
the hair,
in the
they
back.
have the nails,
Yeah.
everything.
Just don't get other hairs in there. You're going to have a whole bunch of people loving you.
Doesn't sound so bad.
Right.
I can work with that.
You can work with it.
Sure, it's a
So,
lot of knees and elbows, but you get the hang of it. But in one place. No, it's great. Well, that's one of the things I've always said. I grew up Catholic with like I said, Catholic with a little hint of spice.
mhm,
And I think one of the things I always thought was somewhat sinister was the concept of bending wills. Like,
right.
if I loved someone and they didn't love me, the idea that something from the outside would make them love me that wasn't genuinely sparked by something in myself, that doesn't do it for
The
me.
question is, would they really love you? What is it really
I
love?
don't consider that love. That's a bending of assuming. And sometimes I wonder, does any of this all really work? Because if it did, I can tell you, I'd be dead 9 times over. Because I've caught daggers in the eye.
Right.
I can imagine, and I think there's enough people who can't stand me, who I think I'd be dead 5 times over, at least.
At
So,
least.
at least,
Yeah.
and so I say, well, then that's when, and this is in the interest of fairness, where some might say, well, there's a higher energy at work that's maybe saying, maybe this time you don't get your wish, because not the best thing. So whether it works and whether it doesn't is the ritual and the bonding and the focus bringing about change, not actually an external force. It's kind of all subjective.
Here's something I think about, Rocky, and let me know what you think. If it's never worked, how does it still? How's it still a belief? You know what I mean? At one point, right? I gamble. I gamble because once I won, and I know that at one point I got to win again, right? Statistically, but if it's never ever worked, and it's something that no one has ever fallen into a spell, no one has ever been entranced to love someone else, no one's son has ever been saved from cancer. How are we still believing in it? Wouldn't it be just defunct so many years ago?
Well, I think that one thing could be said is even a blind squirrel finds a nut. There's something to be said for occasional coincidence. Actually, I'm not an actual disbeliever per se. I just think
Mm,
that in many cases, I know for sure that when you don't know, well, they always say sometimes the best thing is unanswered prayers. And so it would be the same, sometimes, there is a deciding factor outside of what you want that
right.
says, not for you, not for
Well,
you, not now. And I love that you brought up sort of like the extortive thing, because one of the things I always thought when people talk about brujeria, or in Portuguese, if you're a feiticeira, and people who control the fates,
uh,
feiticeira, or feiticeira, if it's a male. But I think that what's interesting is that too has an element of extortion, because nobody does a favor for free,
right.
whether it's the person conducting the ritual or whether the entity you are asking from. It's quid pro quo.
It's
It's like
transactional.
yes, absolutely. And you got to give a little to get a little. And there's been a zillion movies and operas about people saying, okay, I will give you this because I want that. And they blindly promise. They're so, like, even the most famous, like Dr. Faust, and it's there is a payback. There is a collection time. And when they come to collect, and you got to pay up. So whether it's there's some kind of, for lack of a better term, karmic collection on that.
I mean, speaking about paying up, not only the monetary uh compensation that we talked about, right? We talked about,
Sure.
someone charging 6,000, 10,000. We talked about off air. We talked about 17 to $20,000 to make somebody santo, right? That's a very, very American thing. It's a very Western thing. Nobody has that kind of money anywhere else. So
True.
obviously it's scaled up. Once it got to a new region, it's scaled up to now the resources available to this place that we're in now. So I could never see any of this being something that could be super expensive because no one had the resources. The best thing you can have is a sopera, right? The sopera is the big soup pot, and inside you have I think I'm giving away like the that Xenu, kind of like Scientology and Xenu, like the
Right.
final thing. I'm kind of giving away the prize inside of the sopera, where your santos are a collection of rocks. How you get them are different ways. Things that are important to you would make up your composite santo, right? And these things are kept in your home forever. Now, there's different ones like Yamaya, the ones for the ocean. If that's the one that you're set with, Chango, like we talked about, Owatala, Ogun, Elegua, all of these different ones that you could be, and they're all governed differently, right? And they're all basically Catholic deities made into idols through the lens of an African diaspora, if you think about it, right?
Right. And that's like, well, I know like Santa Barbara
Yeah.
is connected with Chongo. And somebody might say, well, how does that even work? The legend is, well, I shouldn't say legend. That's a little disrespectful. My apologies. The story of Saint Barbara.
You can call it a myth.
It's okay. Well, I try to be respectful, if nothing else, because my mom is a devout Catholic and I love and respect my mom. I don't believe what she does, but I try not to be a real jerk about it.
Disrespectful. No, I never try to be. We
Yeah,
poke a lot of fun on my channel.
sure.
Things, because I do bring a dark humor is really, really important as well.
It
Because
very much is.
bringing laughter to looking at something so ridiculous that people believe, that may as well be true. I have no idea. It could be true, but from my lens, it's fun to bring on people, kind of poke fun and say like this. At least we know about it. I'm bringing it to the masses, and
Sure.
we have a couple of laughs. That's good too.
Well, the story, myth, legend of Saint Barbara is that she was her father was a king. He was pagan. He locked her in a tower because she wanted to renounce paganism, and he was so disappointed. There's a whole lot of detail in stories, but the end note to this is that he beheaded her in the end. It was a lovely dad. And he kills her because she will not bend to his will, as far as she died a martyr for the Christian faith, and for his grievance, he was smited. The key here is lightning. And lightning is, so like when my grandmother was terrified of thunderstorms, and the minute it got rumbly, she started praying to Saint Barbara. And so she would start praying to Saint Barbara because she was terrified. And Saint Barbara was the patron saint of thunderstorms, lightning, and all that. So tell me, what's Chongo about?
Chango
He's
is
a lightning guy.
he's a lightning guy, and you said it. You said it right. Chango is like the war, also another war.
Yes.
Kind of a god, right? They are intertwined, just like you said, Santa Barbara. It's kind of hard to wrap your mind around why Chango would be Santa Barbara, a woman, right? Or La Caridad del Cobre, which is also right. But we usually give him a shrine. If you are the Chango, the hijo or hija de Chango, the son or daughter of Chango, that means you're going to have him on a pillar, and this pillar is usually Chango is usually a wooden sopera. We talked about a sopera, the soup, right? Cauldron, for lack of a better word, it's a wooden cauldron with a lot of etchings on the outside, at least the ones that I've seen. His colors are red, black, and white, and we also have something called ide. Ide it's almost like a bracelet that shows people who you are a son of. And it would be, the traditional beads, and there would be the beads all around, like one black, one white, one red, and then so on and so forth.
And that's very, very cool.
Yeah, it's one of the highest you could be. If you are hijo de Chango, that means that you are touched a little bit better than any others. Just because he's so well known. I don't know if that's something that, if there's like
a status to it.
If there's a spectrum, there's a status. Exactly. No, not so much of a powerful spectrum physically, but more of a status to be like, oh, tú eres hijo de Chango. That means you're the son of. There's so many of us, and then believe it or not, there are sects, between santeros that are actually, like those people will get together, and those people will have a smaller party, And going further to, like you said, things are transactional and how much we have to actually pay monetary money to be a part of this. When you're made santo, let's say we're you're hija de Chango and we're making you santo, right? You've paid your $17,000 to $20,000 up front. Now we make you an altar. We make you an altar for a week, where other santeros are going to come. They're going to pay respects in a certain way. I guess we'd have to be on camera and have my whole body to show you how we actually do it. We throw ourselves on the floor,
Yes.
and
Prostrate.
exactly. And the other person who's a little bit higher than you, like a babalao or italero, like my dad, would allow you by swiping your back to get up, right? And like saying like it's okay to get up, like as you were, right? In this altar, there are all types of fruit you could possibly imagine, from papayas to bananas to mangoes, apples, fresh fruit that no one touches. This is for. You ever heard? You know who Willie Chirino is?
I'm sorry, who?
Willie Chirino. He's
I do
a
not.
very famous salsa singer from
I,
Miami.
I do not know him. I'll
Yeah,
have to look
and
that
one of his songs is "Mister Don't Touch the Banana," because Mister Don't Touch the Banana, la banana de Chango. You can't.
Oh, got it. Okay.
Yeah, you cannot touch, like, so that's saying like let's say someone outside, like an American, would come in that has no idea what he's looking at. You come to una fiesta de santo, and he sees all these bananas. He's going to go for a banana and be like, "Whoa, mister, don't touch the banana."
Right. Right.
Right. So aside from this, altar is full of things, right? There's mats on the floor, wooden mats, almost like yoga mats, but wooden, almost like the Muslim praying mats, where
Sure.
the Yabo, the person that just became Santo, is going to be sitting Indian style, not allowed to use chairs. They have to eat with a spoon. They can't use forks. They have to abstain from sex for a year. They have to be all in white. And this entire process means they're born again as a child. So they're trying to bring you
Wow.
back to children, basically a child status with an altar. And you'll
That's
eventually
intense.
be reborn. It's unbelievably taxing as a human being, as I've seen it. Aside from the fact that these people are rayado en palo, which means that they're cut with a razor in certain parts of their body, that allows the saints to permeate you, within. Not a lot of people have that. That's usually something you do before you become santo. There's a couple things you have to do, but ultimately that week-long party that you have is to pay respects to you and almost to say goodbye to your old self and to see you in a year.
So it's like being at your own wake.
Born, renew. Exactly right. It's almost like a reverse wake if you think about it.
Right.
And then emerging out the other side, and then there you start your life anew with your new saint guarding you, if you will.
And it's transformative in every respect. Yeah. And it's on honor. It's not something, I think that it's always amazing the connections between offerings, not only of and they don't typically eat the animals that are sacrificed. Like, I mean, you kill a goat in front of a Portuguese person, it's on a spit. It goes right on there.
No doubt.
A little bit of pimento weed, we're good.
Yeah, a little bit cardamom.
A little pimento weed, we got this.
Qué rico.
I actually don't like goat. It's not anything against the goat. I'm not keen on lamb either. So whatever, to me, they taste markedly similar, and whatever that taste is, I could do without. I'll eat the chicken though.
Imagine what you said was funny. Like, so if we're killing a goat, we're putting it on a spit. Imagine the poverty in Cuba and the things that people were going through in Cuba, all the way from 1959 to present day. People are willing to sacrifice a goat, a lamb, something that's edible.
That could feed their family.
That could, and still they throw it away because they believe, to a certain extent, that now has you've rid yourself of evil, and now it's inside of that, right? And so, for example, there's one ritual where you take a chicken. This is going to be a little graphic, where you take a chicken by the feet, living chicken, and you pass it along everyone, the person's head, neck, especially where there might be an ailment, and all around. And then now once that chicken has taken that evil, now you dispose of the chicken by saying, in front of the saint, by saying, please, elegua, for example, please take away, all the pain, the ailment that this person might have. Let it pass through this chicken, and by it dying, let it be a symbol of whatever ailment they have that's dying. So same with eggs. There's one with where you do like a chicken egg everywhere, and then maybe you have something in your liver, things like that. it goes all over your body. Then when they crack the egg is supposed to be a different color, like a darker color, because it's
That
taken on.
happened to me once.
It has.
It has.
Was it
It
dark?
has. It was a dark, bloody egg.
Wow.
And actually, I was thinking about not at it wasn't part of a ritual. I was actually making breakfast. But that had been a very stressful, difficult week. And in my head, I'm just like, man, I just, when you start your, what I call your wishcraft in your head,
Yeah.
like I wish this, and then there was a couple of people like, I just need them to get the hell out of crack the egg. And all of a sudden, I'm like, oh my God. And I'm looking around. There's nobody home. I'm looking around like, and I'm taking pictures of it and send it to my girlfriend. It's like, do you see this?
Did I will this?
And you know
You
what I
know?
did with that dish? Now here's where you can take the sense and all the common sense in the world. I took that little dish with that egg and I put it right on my little shelf next to my grandmother's picture. I said, you know what to do with this better than I do.
There you go. There you go.
and
There you
we
go.
put I put out food for the deceased. I honor them at holidays. I honor them with shots of alcohol for me and them. And I enjoy that part of remembrance. And one of the things I think is kind of a carryover into some of this is the old sin eating.
Mhm.
So we have collations after funerals.
Yeah,
You got to sin eat. It's para salmish, so that's for their soul, so they
exactly.
can. Yeah.
And
In
it's
fact,
funny.
that's how.
I'm
Oh,
sorry.
go ahead. No, you go.
No, I was gonna say, like, I was gonna piggyback off what you said about the alcohol before we forgot
Uh-huh.
about that. Just because I know you've seen this. We are big rum drinkers, right? Bacardi is from Cuba. It eventually went to Puerto Rico when 59 happened, right? We lost a lot of the things that made us us. But Bacardi, white rum, we take a big swig of that and we spray it
Yeah,
all on the saints, so they also have something to drink. We also make
absolutely.
cafecito, right? Cuban coffee. We make cafecito, and the first pot always goes to the saint, and we put one there for everyone to acknowledge that they need to drink first, because they're the ones that protect us and give us everything that we have.
I
And
remember my oldest aunt pouring stuff out and saying
yeah,
that's spiritual strength for the Holy Ghost.
right, yeah, and I mean,
And it was
a
same
lot
thing.
like we pour stuff out. Hey, pour some out for the homies, right? It's the
Right.
same. It's the
Pour
same.
one for my
It's the same
homies.
kind of thing, right? So when you see it through an American lens, you're like, oh, this is a bunch of stuff, but
Yeah,
you're doing something really important in Cuba and like in the 80s when people really needed that reinforcement, from their saints. And
sure.
um, not only the food, like we mentioned before, and the flan and the pastelitos and the croquetas,
Oh,
they would all get that.
it's
They
all
would
so good.
oh, it's amazing. I would die for that.
Yes, it is.
They
Oh, it
they would get
totally
that
is.
first, and then they would get their drink, they would get their alcohol, and then to end, we'd light a big stogie, a big Cuban cigar, and put it right on the legua, right
Oh,
on the
there you
shell of the
go.
legua, and then we'd let that go and let them enjoy the party just as much as we are.
And I have a ghost in my house.
How do you know?
And how do I know? He leaves us things. Well, I say us. I'm sorry. I'm single now. I'm newly single, so I keep forgetting. He leaves me things. I hear footsteps. Now, this is a very, very old house, and I live here, so I know it's not me walking. I'm the only one home. And I hear the creak, the floors creak and that kind of thing. And it was kind of funny. I kept getting these weird senses, nothing, ugly, just sort of like the sense that I wasn't alone. And I remember I kept feeling it initially when I first moved here, when I was like sewing something for the house or something like that, because if you have Portuguese and you can't sew, they kick you out. So if you're a girl, so yeah, I was like making, place. I don't know. I was making some kind of table runner or some such not. But there was, some issue with the machine, and you never swore until you've operated a sewing machine and all of that kind of thing. And I remember telling my neighbors about it, and they were like, "Oh, Henry who lived there, he was a dream. He used to love to help me. He would help me with my sewing because he was an artist and he made puppets." And
This is the ghost of the person in your house.
right, the person was the last person to live here
Okay.
before I did. And he made marionettes and he would make their clothing, and they were beautiful, absolutely beautiful. He was an artist. And she was just like, yeah, he always used to kind of watch over me while I was sewing. And I'm like, that's really weird because that's kind of when I was like,
That's a little bit too. That's like kind of really specific,
yeah.
right?
And then Now there is an empty cabinet that's a built-in for like in the dining room for dishes and whatnot. Completely empty when I moved in. Pulled everything out of it on Thanksgiving because you need all your dishes and everything back. So everything had been cleaned out of there more than once. Walk by it, and I'm one of those people I can always tell if something's just a little off. And I look and I'm like, I don't recognize that. And I open the cabinet and it's a shot glass on its side. I would
Hmm.
never leave something on its side. My
I'm too
OCD would
OCD
not
for
allow
that.
this. Would
We said it at
not
the same
allow
time.
it. And not only that, it was also in an off spot. I would not allow that either. Everything was
Whoa.
just so yeah.
Talk
So
about
that's why
spooky. That's spooky.
even walking by, I saw it out of the corner of my eye because I'm like, something's out. So I open the cabinet and it's a shot glass that says Henry's Bar, South Beach, meaning it was like a souvenir, like you buy it in the shop with your name on
From Miami, South Beach?
it. Correct.
Wow.
And it says
Okay.
Henry's Bar, South Beach. And I have no idea where it came from. And it wasn't in there because we had emptied the thing for Thanksgiving with all my friends over. And I even mentioned it to the landlady, and she's like, that wasn't there because I cleaned that myself. So now that shot glass comes out whenever there's a gathering, and we have a drink as we call Tenry to Henry. We include him in all of our things. My several friends have reported being aware that they felt that something was there, and one friend is scared half to death and won't go in our bathroom. But other than that, it's kind of funny. But you know, I think that the whole idea of incorporating the offerings,
Right.
whether it's a shot glass, whether it's I I I think I'd be kind of like squicky about killing a chicken though, me personally.
Totally. Or a dove or a beautiful, just something that's so pretty
Yeah,
too. Like, we don't think twice about killing cockroaches or ants
no,
or things of that nature. Maybe things that we find icky or gross or possibly
chickens are gross. They're
they're
delicious, but they're gross.
they're gross living, but somehow they're
They
one
really
thing.
are
It's
filthy
it's one of the
animals.
it's one of the, think about it. As a chicken, is there anything else better than like we like things dead? Like the chicken is better dead than alive. Is there anything else like that? Think about it, right?
Yeah,
Like
good
a,
point.
a living chicken's gross. It smells. It's shitting constantly. It's
Yes, it
also
is.
it pisses while it shits, right?
I don't know. You get to a certain age, and I gotta have a lot of choice there, buddy. So I mean, I would make fun of that too
It's all
much.
hey, it's always poo poo time.
It is
But
always that being.
but
It's
yeah,
crazy, and I remember, like I said, the sin eating thing is kind of a prevalent culture that's sort of spread out from one side of the pond to the other, and we all do these things, and I think a lot of people don't realize how much of their life is based in superstition and ritual. Whether
absolutely.
they grew up in a Latin community, whether they grew up, I think anywhere. You could talk to Native Americans, and they're going to have traditions that may seem unusual.
Absolutely. Think about, I mean, even here, even the most benign ones, like step on a crack, break your mother's back. I mean, there's a million things that people go through. They won't step under a ladder. Stepping under a ladder, just people wouldn't do it back in Roman times because it meant literally going through the triangle of God, right? So it doesn't mean that it's something bad's going to happen. It just means that you were like kind of almost defying God going through the ladder. We do that today. It's been like 3,000 years.
I always thought it because you could get paint on your head,
That's the most right. That would make the most
right?
sense.
And it just
Yeah.
seemed practical to not walk under a ladder.
A hammer may fall.
A hammer might fall on you. You might bump into it, and then they're covered in paint.
Yeah.
And I never figured out the black cat thing. I think just I think that's a pop culture from the association with the witch image
I
that
think
that
it's
was born of it.
yeah, us being enamored with like witch culture and how that, from the 60s, you think about little like Bewitched, right? That it
Bell
was
Book and Candle.
yeah. And
Remember that?
it was like a benign, they made it into, it was such a horrible thing. And then they made this like pagan thing into like more of a benign, like, oh, she's cute. She moves her nose, but
I
like,
blame Gerald Gardner and Ray Buckland for that. Ray Buckland, rest his soul, was a very, very funny guy. And I ended up actually in a conversation with him very briefly in the 90s. And he's very educated, very, very British. And I kind of like looked at him and said, So I got a question. You went to Oxford. You have a PhD in anthropology. Was inventing a religion your thesis? Like, is this like your science project?
Right.
And I wasn't saying it disrespectfully, but I sort of kind of said, if I was going to come up with an amazing anthropological, he never confirmed or denied, but he did tell me I was a clever girl. But
Clever girl.
a clever girl. And he had that like David Bowie stuff. Aren't you a clever girl?
How did
So I
you
was
get
thinking of
through
the
it? How did you
lyrics.
get through that interview?
Oh, it was first. What made it easier was it wasn't an actual interview. It was literally a conversation. He was
Okay.
at a museum in New Orleans,
Oh,
and
wow.
so it was more like a social interaction. But I would have loved to have gone interviewed him. That if I had a podcast then, oh yeah, we didn't even
How
know from
deep?
podcast then. He was very, very nice, very erudite, very bubbly, very witty man. He was entertaining as all get out and a pleasure to meet. But I'm not convinced that wasn't his thesis. That's not to
I mean,
say that there isn't any merit to what's there. It's just to say that I think taking the old, because the traditions are not of Wicca are not new,
no.
nothing new, and he kind of packaged it a little differently. He just sort of like tightened up the seams and made it a how to. But those are all ancient pagan practices.
We talked a little bit about in our prior conversation about we brought up Scientology, right?
Oh yeah,
Scientology. Think about where that came from. Think about the person
L.
that
Ron Hubbard.
L.
No,
Ron Hubbard was the most prolific science fiction writer of his time in the Guinness
very
Book of
much.
World Records, very much, right? Wrote all of the science fiction novels. Literally said the only way we're going to make money in this world is to create a religion. Goes ahead and creates Dianetics, goes on to mild fame, but really kind of fails, and then repackages it as Scientology. So if we think about it, he literally told you he came from the origins that one needs to come from, told you he was going to package it, repackaged it, and did it, and people still think that Xenu and OT8 is real. Can you imagine?
Why couldn't Robert Heinlein have done this with Grok? We'd be so much happier.
I mean,
We'd be a happier people
seriously.
if we had Grok instead of Robert stuff.
I mean, but and what there's like 40,000 at one point. There was like thousands and thousands of Scientologists at one point, and then now there's maybe 35,000, maybe 40,000 hanging on to
And Tom Cruise.
and Tom Cruise and a little bit of John Travolta and Will Smith, I believe.
Whoa, wow, really? Well, on the flip side of that, because everybody, wants to talk about Tom Cruise because he's forever doing loony things on talk shows and whatnot. But the other thing is there's just as many people, and they're getting this from the Da Vinci Code, who are saying that this performer or that performer are part of the Illuminati.
Oh, Jay-Z and Beyonce, of course.
Yeah,
Of
that's
course.
them.
Number one.
That's them. I live near Philly. I kind of keep a low profile saying things about the Beehive.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. If the Illuminati is real, they're coming after you.
yeah, that's it. They can find me. They're gonna follow the trail of chicken blood. But but and there have been secret societies, the Masons. I mean, and there's
Yeah.
collegiate secret societies. People have seen popular film and depictions of everything from the Masons to Skull and Bones, and some of the leaders of our George Washington was a Mason, I believe. These fraternal organizations do have these shrouds of mystery over them. And then, what makes a fraternal organization with a bunch of skeletons in their closet, literally, I'm talking about you, odd fellows, and different from a cult? Because they
Not
do
much.
charity work?
No, well, it's because of the brotherhood. I think it's because the interconnectedness of, like, let's say you went to Yale and now you're a Skull
Sure.
and Bones.
Right.
You need to. It's for networking. It's nepotism. It's being
Sure.
in a big club that nobody else is in. However sinister it may be inside of the rituals, will never surpass what you get once you become senator of Ohio or whatever, right?
That's a fair point. Yeah.
Because there's nothing that we can see inside of it. So once we, I think if the veil was to be lifted, I would believe that there's a lot of kind of not even interesting stuff that happens in there. I think we want to make our minds make up things, because I'll tell you why. One of my podcast partners was a Mason, and we actually did
Okay.
a podcast about the Freemasons. And he says that once you lift the veil, there's a lot of just like,
Meetings,
it's almost like an AA meeting, like a PTA meeting, right? Like a meeting where people,
planning
yeah,
events,
planning events. What are we going to do about this fiscally? This is our fiscal year's over. We need to, let's do the P&L
fundraise for
report.
this,
Exactly.
charity for that.
Exactly. Now, is there an even deeper, part of the spectrum? There could be. I know I grilled them on everything, and I even brought up the Simpsons episode where it's like, they're all stone cutters instead of masons.
No, right.
And yeah, and I attacked him from every way. It wasn't so much an attack, but I just really wanted to like dissect like what happens in a stonemason lodge. And he said nothing much. It's a, he defended it to the end. Of course, someone who wouldn't want to tell the secrets would probably do that. I think us, since it's a big club and we're not in it, like the government, for example,
Right.
the elites and the cabal and all that stuff, it's a lot more boring once we pull the veil back, I think. But to us right
I think
now,
what we
there's so much
conjecture
fantasy
from what we don't know, I think what the blanks that we fill in ourselves are far more fantastical than what the actual answers are.
Of course, it's a lot more boring back there. Are there sinister things happening? For sure. To the rate that we believe that they're happening, like every single thing has to be punctuated by some kind of an evil thing. I don't think so.
Yeah, I think, it's funny. I think whenever somebody is continually pointing their finger and saying this is evil, that is evil, this is evil, that I swear they are trying to distract me from the real thing.
Projection, or it's a big psyop to kind of, look at talk about a cult, talk about QAnon, right? That was a big psyop. It's people are saying to keep all the people that could take the country back, keep them in their chairs, thinking that someone was going to come and save them, right? And that was perpetuated for what, 2.5 years, a little longer.
Yeah, that was a big deal. Yeah, and I always call it political prestidigitation, because just like a magician who is doing a trick with his left hand is going to wildly gesticulate with his right hand, so you're watching the non-operative hand.
Exactly.
And whenever something absolutely insane happens politically, I never really figure it out, but I always say to myself, what are they distracting me from? What is it I'm not supposed to be noticing? And I kind of get a little more intent on reading up on what's going on, because I'm like, this is the big news because something else they don't want me to see.
Talk about cynicism, right? It's baked in.
Oh, you think?
It has to be, because we've been lied to for our entire lives.
Oh, yeah.
Literally, when you start uncovering things and you're just like, oh, nothing is the way I thought it was. Nothing. To right down to where I thought things came from. They don't. There
was no stork. They started lying to us early. There's no stork in their Santa. Next thing you know, people get pregnant and you find out how. You never look at your parents the same way again. And then, and just look at them and go, oh, no, you didn't.
But we're mostly lied to, that. And, and for our own good,
sure.
They say, I think that everyone should get the whole pie. Like, we should all know as part of this country what happens, how this works, who's doing what and why, because they all work for us ultimately, right? In a perfect world. Now, things like QAnon are thrown at us. Imagine an entire operation making the American people think that every single part of one side of the government are pedophiles. Could you imagine that? Or satanic baby-eating pedophiles.
Wow. That's a busy person.
I mean, every single part of it, like every single from the top Democrat all the way down. Even if you believe it, you have to be in the satanic cult and you have to eat babies. Hillary Clinton needs a baby a day to continue to live. She's probably 600 years old by now. These are the things that
I heard she was vegan, which is almost as bad.
Well,
don't write me letters, vegans. Don't do it. But
let them do it.
But don't encourage them. They're dying for protein and they get so testy. But
you know what I'm saying with that? It's just what another thing we want to believe, right? Because there's no answers. We're not giving the whole story. So as humans, we need to fill in our gaps. That's what we do. Even with sight, we can see something and for a moment, and we look away, and our brain will try to reimagine that image with things that it decides to put together, that it makes sense to it. So of course, we're going to start looking at things and being like, oh, it has to be this. It has to be a cabal. They must be doing this every step of the way. and there's an entire, people are just eating children and terrifying them. I implore anyone that hasn't looked into that or doesn't know, which I doubt, to look into a little bit further so you can understand the depths of what we're talking about.
And this is how your parents prepared you, by never telling you the whole story. Bring it right back to that.
Yeah, exactly right.
That is exactly the kind of stuff they would do when we were kids. They tell you just enough to make you nervous and scared until you'd behave. And
curious.
There you go. That's where this comes from. Somebody's got a Tia that tried to keep you in line.
Right. And look what they made. Look what they made. A guy who needs to be on the internet talking about things that are occult.
Oh, that's awesome. So let folks know. So we're getting ready to wrap up. What's next? What's the next thing you're up to? Tell folks where they can tune into what you're doing and how they can learn more.
Yeah, absolutely. So at Midnight Media _ is going to be my YouTube page, and the link tree, I have most of everything there, where you can sign into my Twitch. You can check out some of my DJ sets on Stationhead. I'm a big drum and bass and electronic guy as well, if you like those kind of things. So there's a myriad of things that I do. What's next is working on YouTube, and trying to do a little bit more short form content, as well as content with myself in it. As confident as I am, and okay to talk to anybody, stand in front of people, be a leader, things like that, I haven't really gotten in front of like doing actually being in my own videos aside from my live stream. So I do a live stream every Wednesday night, which you are more than welcome to join at any time.
I'll have to check that out.
I would love for you to be a part of it, and leave messages. So people come in on Wednesday nights, and you listen to the topic. We're on for about 2 hours, and you can leave a message on the Midnight Media Instagram page. You can leave a voice note, and I'll play it live on the show, so you can be a part of it.
And furthermore, now, when do you go live? We have folks from all over the world listening. What time do you go live? You're in Pacific, right?
I'm in Las Vegas, so I'm on the West Coast Pacific time. So it'll be 7 p.m. Pacific time, West Coast America time. That's usually what we do. If there's any changes, of course, I'll keep everybody abreast of that. But we usually have really good topics. Like, for example, the last one was the history of erotica. And I had
that's very cool. Yeah.
I had my very good friend Hot Donna on. She was spectacular, and we talked about the first dildos and the first automatic.
Oh, they go back to BC.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Cleopatra used to take a box, like a little sarcophagus, and fill it with bees, and then that would be her vibrator.
That seems unsafe.
Very at the start, but she was also a straight freak, if you think about it, because she's thinking about ways to get the
well, no, I'm in praise of her ingenuity, but I'm just saying, that seems unsafe.
Yeah, and we have a lot of great laughs. We have, but at the same time, we learn something, which is my favorite thing to do. I like to incorporate laughing and learning. It seems like you like to do this too, just like we did here.
Very much so.
And pretty much the next step is stay tuned to that, because I'm trying to make that into a much bigger channel, a bigger community where you can all kind of come in and learn stuff. Also, I take requests from the crowd. If somebody says, hey, you should look into this, I'm definitely going to do that. Like, for example, I'm taking a deep dive right now into Andrei Chikatilo, which is probably the worst murderer in Russia, maybe the world's history. And I'm going to do a deep dive on that. Yeah, it goes from dark to a little less dark, but we usually live in that realm.
It's a crazy world out there, isn't it?
And I'm here to show it to you.
And I am so glad you are, because I love to laugh and learn. Folks, again, you're going to go to @midnightmedia_ on YouTube, and you'll get all the information. We're also going to make that a live link in the description of the podcast, so you can click and get right there. AC, thank you so much. Any parting words?
It's been an absolute pleasure. I can't thank you enough. I think we have a lot more in common than we even thought that we had.
I believe so. I think I'm just going to claim you got to be my cousin or something now.
You know what? I think even if we're not, let's adopt each other.
Okay, we're cousins. It's just Paula Maria, my sister's mom. Tell Mom we have a new cousin, and he's nice and he's handsome, and Mom will be very, very nice to know that he's got a full head of hair. My mom's a retired hairdresser.
And I can cook.
She's 95.
Oh, God bless her.
And she's got so tell Ma he's got a full head of hair. So we finally got somebody in the family with a full head of hair.
Show her a picture.
We will indeed. Thank you so much, and thank you all for listening. And remember, folks, stay kooky out there. Thank you for listening to Macabre World. You can find us on the web at www.darkerartsstudio.com.